Hey, welcome back, everyone. It's TPC Mooney 16 here with my sixth edition of March Madness Bracketology. I love college basketball and March Madness and all that. It's my favorite time of the year, so it's just great to be back and doing this again. I watched a lot of basketball this year, probably over 100 games. And again, I try to watch and get a sense of as many teams throughout the year and just kind of form my own opinion and who I think the best teams are, and then I'll supplement with some of the conference tournaments at the end just to see which of the mid-major teams I could see pulling off an upset and kind of who's getting hot and who's kind of losing momentum. Just to go over some of the basics. The games get underway tomorrow night. There's two play-in games and then two more play-in games on Wednesday. And then tournament officially tips off Thursday at 12:15. I believe it is the 8-9 Ohio State and TCU. It's going to be the first game. You can see here I set up another bracket pool in the ESPN Tournament Challenge. Um, Public group name Mooney Hoops Bracket Pool. And yeah, so go ahead and join the group, fill out a bracket, and we'll see who wins this thing. All right, so that's that. Let's get into some picks. All right, so starting in the East, number one overall seed Duke, where I actually thought Arizona was more deserving of the number one overall seed, especially with back-to-back wins over Iowa State and Houston this past weekend in the Big 12 championship. But I can live with Duke. Um, I think they went 32-2 overall, won the ACC, won the ACC tournament. Obviously an elite frontline scorer and likely National Player of the Year in Cam Boozer. He's a star big man. He's just a machine down low, just relentless, a lot of energy. I think he basically leads them in every statistical category. Um, and then they have a couple guards. Isaiah Evans, he's really made a big leap this year. He can really shoot the ball. And then Dame Sarr is another really good shooter. They did just lose Caleb Foster to a foot injury. And then Ngangba, I'm not sure if Foster is out for the whole tournament. I think I forget if he broke his foot or what exactly happened. I do think Ngangba is expected back. Um, so they'll probably need him. And yeah, Duke is one of only four teams in the top 10 in both offense and defense. I think they got the number four team in offense. Here you go, number four in offense, number two in defense. So, really, watching them, their defense is legit. And, they may have lost Foster, who was their main point guard, but they can still score. And again, Boozer, he can put the team on his back. So, obviously, they can Duke. And then, like I said, 12:15, here you go, 3:19, 12:15 p.m. is that's the tip-off game on Thursday. The 8-9 games are always pick-em games, and this one tips off the tournament. Ohio State is led by Bruce Thornton Jr. He's actually from my neck of the woods. Averages over 20 points and 4 assists per game, and I think they said he's Ohio State's all-time leading scorer, which is pretty amazing. TCU, on the other hand, coming out of a really good Big 12 conference this year, and they had wins over Florida early in the year. They beat Iowa State. They've beaten Texas Tech, which is impressive. And I find it best to go with my instincts in these 8-9 games, and my instinct was TCU, so I'm going to go with TCU in a close one. Down to the 5-12, so we got St. John's, and these 5-12 matchups are always tricky because I feel like a lot of upsets come on the 5-12 in the 5-12 game. I was not that high on St. John's this year, watching them in the Big East, especially considering they played UConn a couple weeks ago in the regular season, and I think they said they missed their last like 26 shots in a row, which is just crazy to me. I think they said they went without a field goal in the last like 17 and a half minutes, which I mean, if you're a good team like them to miss that many shots in a row, it just is crazy to me. But I mean, they have beaten UConn twice, including they crushed them on Saturday night in the Big East Championship. And I just think their size and their physicality just kind of bullies people. So I got to go with St. John's over Northern Iowa. Next, we got Kansas and Cal Baptist. Kansas is such a weird team to me, um, led by star Darren Peterson, who was projected to be the number one overall pick in the NBA draft. But there was the whole thing where he wasn't going to play anymore, but then he came back, but then he's had to, he's missed games with injuries, so it's hard to know where exactly he's going to be. But when I've seen him play, he can really play. He can really shoot. He's really fast, really athletic. Um, and other than him, they have guards that are really athletic. Melvin Council Jr. and Trey White, and then Badunga down low, who's a defensive stalwart. I think he may have won Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, but I'd have to double check that. Um, but he's a big shot blocker, and he can score in the paint. And then Cal Baptist, I think they said this is their first year in the tournament, um, which is exciting, but no upset for me. I got to take Kansas here, although I do feel like Kansas is just one of those teams where they come out of the gate slow in the tournament, and next thing you know, you're looking at scores, and Kansas is down by 8 or 10 points in the first half, and it's like, what's going on? But then they kind of regain control. So I stick with Kansas here. So then bottom half we have Louisville and South Florida. I watched Louisville a few times this year. They also have a lottery pick in Michael Brown Jr., who averages 18 points a game. And I think he had a game where he scored like 30, or he made like 10 3-pointers and scored 40 something points. I think I don't remember who they played, but the problem is he has been out with a back issue, so I'm not 100% sure that he's gonna play. Um, but I did just read something that the Louisville coach Pat Kelsey said, basically they sat him in the ACC tournament, so he was 100% for the NCAA tournament. So we'll see where that goes. They also have a guard, Ryan Conwell, who also averages 18 points per game. He can really shoot. Isaac McNeely is a transfer for Virginia that can really shoot. Um, the other side, South Florida, they won the American Conference. I have actually not seen them play this year. I'm still planning on watching the replay of the American Tournament final tonight. But it looks like they're balanced. They have multiple guards that can score, which is key, and they've won 11 games in a row. So they are coming in hot. But I'm going to say that Michael Brown Jr. plays, and that he's the difference. So I'm gonna stick with Louisville here. Um, Next, we got Michigan State and North Dakota State. Tom Izzo, just another one of those teams that, I mean, really doesn't wow you or jump off the page, but they're so solid on defense and rebounding. They finished, I think, tied for second in a really good Big Ten conference. And, they're led by Jeremy Fears, who averages 16 points and over 9 assists per game. I think he may lead the country in assists per game, which is crazy. Um, They did also lose their last 2 games. I think they played Michigan in the last game of the regular season and lost. And then they played UCLA in the Big Ten quarters, and UCLA beat them. But no upset here. I'm, obviously going with the Spartans. Next, we got UCLA and UCF. This is another one where the injuries come into play. UCLA had a really weird year to the point where I I could have swore that there were rumors at some point that Mick Cronin was going to be fired, but I don't know. I could just be imagining that. But yeah, I mean, here they are. They're a 7 seed. Back in the NCAA tournament. The problem is their two-headed monster in Tyler Bilodeau and then Donovan Dent have some injury issues. So Bilodeau didn't play in their last game against Purdue. I think they played Purdue in the Big Ten semifinal, and then Dent played but left the game with an injury. And then UCF on the other hand, they have some big wins this year. They beat Kansas, they beat Texas Tech, but they've lost 4 of their last 5 games, including losses to Baylor, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia. I mean, those are all teams obviously not in the NCAA tournament. But Mick Cronin did say Dent and Bilodeau, they could have played in the Big Ten tournament, or at least their last game they played, but he held them out just for precautionary reasons. So I think they will be back, and I think that's the difference. I think they take care of UCF. All right, UConn, the 2 seed, another weird team to me. If you asked me a couple weeks ago, I had them on my short list of about 4 or 5 teams I think could win the whole thing, but now I don't really know. I mean, at times they've looked like a machine this year, including the game I mentioned earlier against St. John's, where St. John's missed so many shots in a row, and UConn crushed them. But then they lost to Marquette. I think that was their last game of the regular season, and then they get crushed in the Big East final. So, they do have 3 good guards in Ball, Demery Jr., and then this freshman Mullins, who's really good, and then Terrace Reed, who I believe transferred in last year or this year, I forget, but he's a force down low. And Alex Caravan is still there. It feels like he's been there forever. And I mean, I don't know. Hurley, somehow he gets his team to step up in the NCAA tournament all these years. So, we'll see how far they go. But obviously taking him over Furman. Let's go down to the South region. So we got Florida, another one of those teams that I had on my short list, but they did just go out and get crushed by Vanderbilt in the SEC quarterfinal, which was pretty surprising. But I watched that game, and Vandy they did make almost everything. They made almost every shot. I think they shot over 50% from 3 or something like that. But yeah, again, Florida at times this year, another team that has looked like a machine. When you watch them, they have, they returned the big front court from last year's championship team. Chinyalu, Alex Condon, Hauk, who's unbelievable, and then they bring in Handlockton off the bench, who's like a 7-footer. And then he brings in transfers Boogie Fland and Xavier Lee this year, basically to try to replace the elite backcourt that they had last year, where basically then all those guys ended up getting drafted, and so that's kind of my only concern is their guards. How good are they on defense? I mean, we'll see. But I'm still pretty high on Florida, so we'll see how far I have them going. So the 8-9, another toss-up. Clemson, again, a lot of weird teams this year. Clemson, a weird team. They made that run a couple of years ago, all the way to the Elite Eight, kind of out of nowhere. And then I really liked them going into the tournament last year. And then they fell to 12 seed, I think it was McNeese State in the first round. Um, they do have recent wins over both North Carolina and Louisville. Granted, I think that was Louisville without Michael Brown Jr. and that was North Carolina without Caleb Wilson, both lottery picks and the best players on those respective teams. Um, and then you got Iowa, on the other hand, led by Bennett Sturts. He's a really good shooter. He averages 20 points and almost 5 assists per game. Came over from Drake along with Ben McCollum, who's done a really good year, and he's gotten Iowa back to the NCAA tournament. And the two of them last year with Drake went on a little run. I think they beat Missouri. I think it was an 11-6 upset. So I'm gonna go with Iowa. I think Sturts is going to be the best player on the floor, and I think he gets hot and carries them to the first round win. And we got Vanderbilt, hot at the beginning of the year. I think they started 16-0 before losing, and then like I mentioned, they got hot last week in the SEC tournament. They blew out Florida in the quarterfinal. And made it all the way to the championship game before ultimately losing to Arkansas in a really good game. They're led by a pretty dynamic duo in guard Tyler Tanner runs the point, and then Duke Miles, who he was out I think for a knee surgery or something like that during the season, but since he's been back, I mean they have been they've been playing really at a really high level. And the other side of this game, McNeese State, I actually really liked when I watched them in I think it's the Southland Conference. I watched the championship game against Stephen F. Austin. Like I mentioned, they did win a game in the tournament last year, beating Clemson. But that was with Will Wade, who was now at NC State. I just think I wanted to pick McNeese here, but I just think Vanderbilt too hot right now, playing, just playing at too high of a level. So no upset here. Next one down, we got Nebraska and Troy. So Nebraska, again, another weird team. They finished second, tied for second in a pretty stacked Big Ten. They started the year, I think, 20-0. Before, then I think they lost like 3 games in a row or 3 out of 4 after winning 20 games. Price Hanford is a really good wing. He can really shoot it. He's got one of the best shooting strokes, I think, in the country, and quickest. And then, they got big man Rank Mast, who can also shoot the 3. And they had the Big Ten 6th Man of the Year in Braden Frager, who comes off the bench, gives them a boost. But I do think when I've seen teams basically face guard and shut down Sanford, and then their offense just kind of stagnates. And so, not enough, to lose against Troy, but I may not have the Cornhuskers going much further. Taking Nebraska. So now we got North Carolina and VCU. I can already tell this is going to be a pretty popular upset pick. And actually, I think they showed the statistics on these 6-11 matchups. And since 2018, well, going into last year, since 2018, 11 seeds were 12-12 against 6 seeds, which is 500, which is crazy. But then then last year came and only one 6 seed or only one 11 seed won, and so the 6 seeds went 3-1 last year. But pretty close to 500. And when you look at these games, historically, um, and to me, I mean, this game just screams upset because I don't. I mean, I don't even really feel like North Carolina was that good this year, even though they did beat Duke. But then they lost, freshman Caleb Wilson, who's a lottery pick. He's a best player. Um, I did watch VCU in the A10 championship last night. They look legit. They can really shoot. They have the A10 freshman of the year and Nick Lewis, as well as the nation's. I think they said he's the nation's leading scorer off the bench in Terrence Hill Jr. Averages like 14 plus points per game, and I don't know. They just had that pop when they shot the ball, which is swish, swish after swish. Especially from long range, which they do at over 37%. So I'm going to take VCU as one of the first kind of bigger upsets here. So moving down, we got Illinois and Penn. This Illinois team, I think they said is the tallest on average in the nation. Led by freshman guard Keaton Wagler, averages over 18 points, 4.5 assists. And I watched him go into Mackey Arena against Purdue and set the record for a visiting player in the arena with 46 points, including 9 threes. So the kid can light it up. And then, they have Kylan Boswell, who also can handle the ball. And Mirkovic and Stojakovic, are kind of guard forwards that are big, physical, that can shoot or take you off the bounce. And they also finished tied for second in the Big Ten. I think it was Michigan State, Nebraska, and Illinois all finished tied for second, I want to say. And number 2 offensive team in efficiency in the country. I do like the story of Penn with Fran McCaffrey in his first year. And the one kid, I forget his name, but he scored like 46 points or something like that in the Ivy League final yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, I think. But just too much size and scoring for Illinois, so I'm going to take them to the second round. So we got 7-10 St. Mary's versus Texas A&M. Clash of the styles in this one. St. Mary's, I think, was close to like 300. Yeah, St. Mary's, just a tempo, 297. And then you have Texas A&M at 29. So you can clearly tell one team is going to want to play fast. That's Texas A&M. And St. Mary's is going to want to play slow. So Texas A&M's Buckyball, as they call it. So head coach Bucky McMillan in his first year at Texas A&M. I think he came over from Samford. Again, they like to run fast. They shoot a lot of threes. They play press defense as well as, I think, what they call is mother-in-law defense. Basically annoying, in-your-face press defense. Those are his words, not mine. St. Mary's, again, back in the tournament once again. Led by Paulus Morauskas, Mikey Lewis, Joshua Dent. They like to slow you down. This is kind of a toss-up to me, but my gut was Texas A&M, and so I'm going to go with Bucky and the Aggies here. Houston, another great team for Kelvin Sampson and the Houston Cougars. They had a really good year in what was an elite Big 12 conference this year. Probably the best, close with the Big 10 as, the best conference in the country. And he brings in freshman Kingston Flemings this year, who's, an incredible player. He can really light it up. I think he had over 40 points in their game against Texas Tech. Also brings in Chris Sinak Jr., another freshman, and then a lot of guys he returns from the team that almost won the championship last year, if not for if not for a surge from Florida at the end of that championship game. So, Milos Uzan comes back, Emmanuel Sharp, Joe Tugler, all returning starters. Um, so, and then defensively, as Houston usually does, they just lock you down. And I knew they were going to put Houston with Florida for the rematch, which I think is what we're going to get. So taking Houston. All right, so if we go up to the West region. So like I mentioned at the top, I think Arizona probably was deserving of the number one overall seed. I think they're the best team in the country right now, but that's that. Led by Jaden Bradley, who was the Big 12 Player of the Year, runs the offense to perfection, and then freshman Braden Burry's such a player. He can really shoot. He can really drive and finish. He's going to be. I mean, his draft stock has definitely gone up this year over the course of the season. And then don't forget other freshmen and Koa Pete started the year off with 30 points he had in their first game beating Florida, and then this Ivan Karchenkov, really tough physical guard that can score and defend. They got guys off the bench. They have Delorso, who really saved them, I think, in their game against Iowa State in the Big 12 semifinal. I think he had like 23 points off the bench, and he brings in Tobe Awaka, who averages like 9 or 10 rebounds a game. So I really like Arizona this year. So starting them off with a win. Then we got Villanova and Utah State in the 8-9. So full disclosure, I am a Villanova alum. Kevin Willard did a great job in his first year with the program, and I mean basically coming in and building that entire roster from scratch. I think I think they only returned like one or two players from last year's team, and brought in freshmen. He brought in some transfers to get him back to the NCAA tournament. Led by freshman point guard Caden Lewis. Can really handle the ball, distribute, can shoot. And then they have Bryce Lindsey, who can also really shoot. He had a game this year where Villanova scored. I think they made a team record 22 3-pointers in a game, which was, like I said, that was the school record. And Bryce Lindsey had 9 of those, which was a single player record for a game for Villanova. So he knocks down a couple. He can knock down 5 or 6 easily. I did watch Utah State beat San Diego State in the Mountain West tournament final, but I mean, this wasn't really that impressed by them. I mean, they do have Mason Falslev, who I think was the conference player of the year, and then MJ Collins, he leads them in scoring. I think he scores 18 or 19 points per game. He can really shoot, but I'm going to take Villanova in a close one here. I think their defense and their 3-point shooting gets them the win. Then we got Wisconsin and High Point. On the one hand, I feel like this could be a trendy upset pick, because again, the 5-12's always trendy for people picking 12 seeds. On the other hand, Wisconsin's just too good. I mean, they have too many good wins towards the end of the year in a really good Big Ten conference. They made the run in the Big Ten tournament, going all the way to the semifinal. Beating Purdue, they beat Illinois. They were very close to beating Michigan in the Big Ten semifinal. A game in which they made 16 3-pointers, by the way. They have guards, Nick Boyd and John Blackwell, that can really shoot. I did watch High Point beat Winthrop in the Big South Tournament Championship. They have Terry Anderson, a really athletic forward that can score, which could I could see causing some issues for the Wisconsin front court. Um, but I just think the guards win this for Wisconsin here, so I'm going to stick with the Badgers. Then we got Arkansas and Hawaii. It seems like, well, for a time, it seemed like this was another one of those John Calipari teams with, you know, they had talent all over the place, big time freshmen. But I think this team this year is a little bit different. Um, I mean, Darius Acuff Jr. is a dude. He won SEC Player of the Year and SEC Freshman of the Year, and was only the second player in conference history to lead the league both in scoring and assists. Oh, by the way, with the only other player achieving that being a young man named Pistol Pete Maravich, which is, I mean, that's amazing. And, you know, they also have another great freshman in Malik Thomas who can really shoot and score. Um, you know, as well as veterans Trevon Brazile, a really athletic forward that can shoot, and DJ Wagner, who's been with seems like has been with Calipari forever. They have Billy Richmond, who's kind of a lunch pail dude. I don't know that much about Hawaii, but I just can't pick against Acuff and the Razorbacks here. So we got BYU and then the winner of Texas and NC State. Um, I've already heard this being picked as a trendy upset pick with whoever comes out of the NC State Texas game, which will be played tomorrow night. Um, you know, whoever comes out beating BYU. I just I feel like this is the year of the injury because BYU. I mean, they had a really good team. I think they started the year they were top 3 or top 5 in the country. Um, really playing well, and then whatever it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, lost Richie Saunders. He went down with a torn ACL. He was averaging 18 points per game, so that was a big blow. They do obviously still have AJ DeBonsa, who I think leads the nation in scoring. I think he scores over 25 points per game. Um, he can go off in any game. He can shoot from anywhere. Is elite at getting to the rim. I have seen both NC State and Texas play this year, and it'll depend on what happens tomorrow night in their game, their playing game. Um, and I know one of these playing teams always wins, and I didn't pick the other playing team to win, but I think I'm still going to go with BYU. I think they hold on. I think DeBonsa just takes over and wins the game for them. Coming down, we got Gonzaga and Kennesaw State. I can't really figure out Kennesaw State this year. Or, sorry, Gonzaga. I can't really figure out Gonzaga. They've beaten Alabama and UCLA, I think. And then, obviously, once again, kind of blew through the WCC. But they're just not. They just don't seem to be the offensive juggernaut that Mark Few usually has. They are number 9 in defensive efficiency, so they get it done on the defensive side of the ball. And I mean, obviously, Mark Few is usually, he's always a lock for at least one win in the tournament. So even though I think they're a little bit weaker this year, no issues getting through the first round. So now we got Miami and Missouri. I watched Miami a few times recently, and I think their coach Jay Lucas has done a great job in his first year getting them to the tournament. Um, you know, they have guards in Trey Donaldson, who came over from Michigan, as well as freshman Shelton Henderson, who's kind of, I mean, he's built like a tank. True Washington, they can all shoot and drive. Malik Renew is a matchup nightmare. I remember watching him play for Indiana years ago. It seems 2 or 3 years ago. Um, but he's a matchup nightmare for defenses. On the other side, you got Missouri, who finished seventh in the SEC. They lost their last three games, although they do have wins over Tennessee, Florida, and Vanderbilt. All six seeds are better in the tournament. Obviously, with Florida being a one seed, that's an impressive win. Mark Mitchell leads them in scoring, rebounds, and assists. He's a big man, that can dominate the paint. Another big man, I can remember him. I think he was with Duke 2 or 3 years ago. It seems like so long ago he played for Duke, and he's been with Missouri, I guess, the last couple of years. I went back and forth with this one, but I'm going to go with my instinct, which was Miami. Then we got Purdue and Queens. Purdue, obviously, winners of the Big Ten tournament. They took down Nebraska, UCLA, and Michigan on their way to doing so. Braden Smith, once again, obviously the engine that makes this whole thing go. One of 3 4-year seniors with the program, which is very rare, today in college basketball. But he's one of 3 with Fletcher Lawyer and Trey Kaufman-Renn. And then they also have, their other big man, Clough. He was huge for them in the Big Ten tournament. It just seemed like he was all over the place, especially against Michigan. And I think they said this was the highest scoring Purdue team in 55 years. So that's crazy. But yeah, the metrics show it. You can see Purdue #1 offensive efficiency rating. So that's impressive. So, obviously taking them over Queens here. Let's head down to the Midwest region. So we get the Midwest region, obviously #1 seed, Michigan. Michigan spent most of the season on top of it all. They went 31-3, won the Big Ten regular season, which was a really strong Big Ten this year, really deep Big Ten. They have size and versatility all over. You have Cadeau. Well, Cadeau isn't tall, but he runs the point. They have Namari Burnett, who can really shoot, and then Lendeberg, the Big Ten Player of the Year, who can just do everything. They have Morez Johnson is another big man that can stretch you out and score. And then, oh, by the way, down low, they have Mara, who is only 7'3", and just basically towers over everybody. And yeah, they're one of only 4 teams, I think, that are in top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, and #1 overall in defense. So they're very strong, and we'll see how far they go here. Then we got 8-9 in Georgia versus St. Louis. Georgia led by Jeremiah Wilkinson, who can really score. Georgia as a team averages, I think over 90 points per game. They did lose to Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, but played pretty well coming down the stretch. They beat Kentucky, Texas, and Alabama in the last couple weeks. St. Louis is just kind of an odd team to me because they did go 28-5. They won the Atlantic 10, and I watched them in their win over VCU a couple weeks ago, which is another team. VCU, another team that I like. Just nothing really stuck out to me. Again, 8-9s are all toss-ups. My gut said Georgia, so I'm going to stick with Georgia. All right, coming down, we got the 5-12 in Texas Tech versus Akron. Again, to continue on the theme of the year of the injury, just a brutal, horrible loss for Texas Tech to lose All-American JT Toppin a couple weeks ago. He was having another dominant year. He was, on pace, to be another, All-American second year in a row. And Texas Tech as a team, I think, had one of the best resumes in the country. They've beaten Duke, Arizona and Houston, which is just crazy. But they still are a good team without Toppin. Um, they've had to switch things up, kind of their style of play. But I mean, they still have Christian Anderson who can really score. He's one of the best guards in the country. Um, I did watch Akron. They came all the way back in the MAC tournament championship. I think they were down by like 12 or 15 points. Came all the way back against Toledo, and they have some guys that can really play. But I don't think the Fighting Grant McCaslins are going to go down easy. So I had them moving on to the second round. Then we got Alabama and Hofstra. Alabama, just kind of a weird team to me because, again, when they're at their best, they can probably beat anybody. Um, they have two of the best guards in the country in LeBaron Philon Jr. and Aiden Holloway that could both easily put up 30 points in a game. And they have Latrell Wrightsell back, who missed the tournament last year due to an injury. They're number 3 in offensive efficiency, but their problem is on the defensive end. Where they're all the way down at 67th in defensive efficiency. I also worry about them just from a size and physicality standpoint. For some reason, I feel like Hofstra could scare them here, but I'm going to stick with the Crimson Tide. So then we got Tennessee versus SMU and Miami of Ohio. Another one of those Rick Barnes Tennessee teams that is tough and physical, but are they able to score enough points is the question. They do have Jacoby Gillespie, one of the best guards in the country, can really shoot, as well as Nate Amen, who's a really good freshman, who I think missed some of the SEC tournament due to an injury, but I think he's supposed to be back for their first round game. And then on the other side of this, you have SMU, who finished, this is weird to me, they finished all the way down at 11th in the ACC. So part of me is like, how did they even get into the tournament? But do have a really good guard in Boopy Miller, who runs the show. I did see them play earlier in the year, and they look pretty good, but they lost 5 of the last 6 games. So not playing too well right now. And then, Miami of Ohio, obviously one of the biggest stories this year, just a historic season, going 31-0 before they lost to UMass in the MAC tournament. I think they said SMU opened up as an 8.5-point favorite in that game, which will be on Wednesday night, but I don't really have a sense of kind of who will win that. I'm gonna pencil in Tennessee for now because, again, one of these playing teams always wins a game, almost always, and excuse me. It's hard, again, it's hard to know who will come out of that, but I'm gonna pencil in Tennessee for now. That could change based on what happens in the playing game. Then we got Virginia and Wright State. Virginia, first year of the Ryan Odom era, he took over for Tony Bennett, who retired. And Odom took both Utah State and VCU to the NCAA tournament in the past 5 years or so. They're led by Malik Thomas, Sam Lewis, Chance Mallory, 3 good guards that can score and defend, and then Tez DeRitter, who's a long, athletic forward that's very hard to defend. He's kind of like a stretch forward center that can really shoot. The only team to beat Virginia in their last 15 games is Duke, and that's they played Duke twice. Duke beat them twice, but they went 13-0 in the other games. So I like what Odom has done in his first year, and he'll start. I think he starts that off with an NCAA tournament win. Then we got Kentucky and Santa Clara. Kentucky is just one of those teams, again, that can beat almost anyone, but can also be beat by almost anyone. Um, the backcourt, you know, pretty solid. Otega Owe, Denzel Aberdeen, who came, he came over from the national championship team from last year from Florida, and then Tyson Chandler, who's a really good shooter. Plus, you got Mo Diabate and Malachi Moreno down low that can score in the post. And then, congratulations to Santa Clara for making it back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 30 years. I think it was 1996. Led by Christian Hammond, who can really score. I think this may be a trendy upset pick for people who just don't think Kentucky is any good anymore. And I want to pick the upset only because I only have one other 10 seed winning. But I just think the athleticism of Kentucky's guards and the physicality I think will be too much for the Broncos. So I'm gonna sticking with Big Blue Nation here. Lastly, we got Iowa State and Tennessee State. So I was actually down on Iowa State the past month, but they have beaten Purdue, St. John's, Kansas. They beat Houston earlier this season. They're led by senior guard Tamin Lipsey and maybe the best shooter in the country in Milan Momcilovic. And then, they have Joshua Jefferson who can really score. Killian Toure, who I think led them in scoring the first couple months of the season, and then, he kind of went cold the past month and a half. But he had a nice game in the Big 12 semifinal against Arizona, which was maybe the best game of the season in college basketball. I mean, just what a great game that was. They are number 4 in defensive efficiency and number 21 in offense, which is really good. My only issue is that when they are not shooting the ball well, it's just kind of like they're running around in mud, and like their offense just completely stagnates. So that's what makes me nervous as far as them, kind of making a big run here. However, I don't think Tennessee State hangs around for too long. We saw what Iowa State just did to Arizona State last week. All right, so that's it for the first round. So here we go. So now we're back up to the top. Let's start with the East. So we got Duke and TCU. To me, the 8 or 9 would have to be really good for me to pick them over a 1 in the second round. Duke just too good defensively, too strong. They'll have the best player on the court, so I'm taking Duke to the Sweet 16. Then we got St. John's and Kansas. This one I've gone back and forth with several times because, again, honestly, I don't really like either of these teams. Peterson will be the best player on the court, but I don't know. I kind of feel like you got Ejiofor, who I think was the Big East Player of the Year, had another great year, and their physicality, they just dominate, and I think they'll be too much for Kansas. I'm going to take them over Kansas. And down here we got Louisville and Michigan State. I think this is where it ends for Louisville, with or without Michael Brown Jr. Again, I think just Michigan State too solid. Jeremy Fears, I think he'll just take control of the game, get the win. And we got UCLA and UConn. I saw something that said this could be really entertaining as far as watching the head coaches between Mick Cronin and Dan Hurley, just yelling at the refs all game. Like I said, UCLA kind of has a little momentum, and UConn not so much, but UConn too much for them. Again, I think they're when they are playing well, I think they can beat almost anybody. So I think it'll be really tough for UCLA, even if they have Dent and Bilodeau back, to beat UConn. So I'm going to take UConn. Scroll down to the South. Again, can't take the not, I can't take the 8 or 9 over the 1. So I'm going to stick with Florida. I think Florida gets in a rhythm, coming off the loss to Vanderbilt. I think they kind of have a reset, get things going, and I think they start a little nice little run here. So I'm going to take them over Iowa. Now Vandy and Nebraska. I'm not that high on Nebraska, but this is one of those games where it's like, oh, clearly Vanderbilt is the much hotter team. They have all the momentum. Nebraska's, arrow pointing down, and then this game happens and Nebraska wins it. But I'm going to stick with my gut. I think Vanderbilt keeps the momentum going. Again, I think they're 2 guards. I think they're just playing at too high of a level. And I think that'll set up a nice little revenge game for Florida in the Sweet 16. So we got VCU and Illinois. So this is really interesting. I mean, again, Illinois elite offensively, a lot of size. They'll have the best player in Wagler. But I mean, VCU can also light it up. But again, I mean, even if this were to become a shootout, I still favor Illinois, so I'm going to take Illinois. Now we got Texas A&M and Houston. I think Buckyball runs into a brick wall here. I just think Houston. Honestly, I feel like their team this year is better than the team that almost won last year. I just think the addition of Kingston Flemings is just an elite scorer. In addition to the other veterans they have there. So I'm going to take Houston over Texas A&M. We go back up to the West. Arizona and Villanova. Villanova, I just think will have no chance. They do not have a lot of size. They're not very physical. They do have Duke Brennan down low, who averages I think close to 9 or 10 rebounds a game. But I think Arizona, between their guards and Pete and Awaka and Krivas down low, will just be way too much size for Villanova. So I got Arizona to the Sweet 16. Then this one is the big game. So Wisconsin and Arkansas. Another game, another 4 or 5 that I've gone back and forth on, and really don't know what to do with, because I really like Arkansas and Acuff, but I also really like Wisconsin with Boyd and Blackwell. But I think Arkansas's size and presence in the paint, I think, will be the difference. Late offensive rebound, kick out for a 3, that'll win the game. So I'm going to take Arkansas. Coming down, we got BYU and Gonzaga. Again, I think a lot of people are going to take this 11 seed over BYU. I'm sticking with BYU. I don't really love Gonzaga, so I'm going to take BYU over Gonzaga in a little mini upset here. The Cougars, I'm going to say they get hot. They got Rob Wright. Still have Rob Wright and A.J. DeBonsa, even though they've lost Richie Saunders. They still have Kava Keita down low. That'll be a nice little matchup between him and Graham Ike of Gonzaga. But I'm going to stick with BYU. And then here, you got Miami and Purdue. I think Purdue keeps it rolling too much for Miami. So take Purdue to the Sweet 16. Then down to the Midwest, we got Michigan and Georgia. I think, Train stops here for Georgia. I think Michigan just too much size down low. I think their guards, will be too much for Georgia. Again, even if I know Georgia scores 90 points a game, even if it becomes a shootout, I'm still going to take Michigan. I think Georgia has no answer for Lendeborg. So now we got Texas Tech and Alabama, and again, really, this is like the year of the 4-5 matchup, which I think is going to give a lot of really good games, because I really like both of these teams. It's hard. Texas Tech kind of reshaping the whole, their whole strategy without Toppin. Still have Christian Anderson, but again, Alabama, you have LeBaron Philon, you have Aiden Holloway, Latrell Wrightsell. They got a lot of guards that can shoot, but Texas Tech is a dominant defensive team. Let's see, where is Texas Tech in the ratings? Texas Tech. Okay, so 33. All right, so not that dominant. 12th in offensive efficiency. And then here you go, Alabama 3 in offensive efficiency. Ooh, man. You know what? Let's see. So I got Vanderbilt as the 5, and I got St. John's as the 5. I got Arkansas. So I'll take Alabama to even it out. Take Alabama, hits a 3 late. Baron Philon hits a couple threes late in the game. They pull it out. So coming down, we got Tennessee and Virginia. Again, I don't feel great about Tennessee winning their first round game. So I think just by nature of that, I'm going to take Virginia here. They're solid. I like Ryan Odom. Again. They have guards that are good, and they have DeRitter, down low. So I'll take Virginia moving on. And then here we got Iowa State and Kentucky. I think it ends for Kentucky here. Again, I just think, when Iowa State is rolling and shooting, they can probably beat anybody. They almost beat Arizona on Friday. And they've, they've beaten, they beat Houston. So, they had a really good year in a really good Big 12 conference. So, got to pick them to the Sweet 16. All right, so here's when the decisions really get interesting. So, Duke St. John's, would that be a matchup? I don't know where, it doesn't say where this game is going to be played. I don't know where the Eastern Regional is going to be, but would that be a matchup between Boozer and Ejiofor down low? I just think Duke, too much scoring. Again, if St. John's gets cold and can't turn Duke over, they're going to have some issues, and I think that's exactly what happens. So then we come down here, and we got Michigan State and UConn, what would be another really good matchup. Man, it's hard because, again, UConn can look really good, and then they can look average. And I feel like Michigan State is just more consistent. So, you know what? I'm going to go with Michigan State here. Pulling a little upset over UConn to go back to the Elite Eight. Come down here, Florida and Vanderbilt. Like I said this up earlier. I think this is a revenge game for Florida. They will certainly not overlook Vanderbilt. And I think they show up, and I think they get the win here. Coming down here, Illinois and Houston, kind of an offense versus defense kind of a game. But again, your best player, as far as matchups here, you'd have Keaton Wagler and Kingston Flemings. And that really would be a great matchup. But I don't know. I just think the physicality of the Houston defense, their guards, Uzan and Flemings and Sharp, I think they'll just be too much for Illinois. They'll turn them over, um, and I think they pull out the win here to head to the Elite Eight. So coming up here to the West. So we have Arizona and Arkansas. Man, again, I do like Arkansas. I love Darius Acuff Jr. I just think he's one of the great guards we've seen in some years. But I just think Arizona too much. I think Arizona has too much. They're too solid, too physical. They're probably too big for Arkansas. I think the guards of Arizona between Burries and Bradley and Karchenkov will be, I think they'll outmatch Acuff and Malik Thomas. So I'm gonna go with Arizona here to head to the Elite Eight in the West. And then down here we got BYU and Purdue. I think it ends for AJ DeBonsa and the Cougars here. I think I'm gonna go with Purdue. I think Purdue keeps it going. Again, I just think they're playing at a really high level. They have all the momentum. They just beat Michigan, and pretty handily beat Michigan. So they keep it rolling to the Elite Eight. Come down here. We got Michigan, Alabama. I would love to see this game, but again, I think Alabama's weakness is size and physicality down low, and Michigan has size and physicality down low. They will expose that. Michigan moves on. Then we got Virginia and Iowa State, two pretty traditional defensive powerhouses. So that could be a really interesting game. Ooh, man. I almost feel like Virginia is the more consistent team, but I don't think I can take them over Iowa State. So I'm going to take Iowa State moving on to the Elite Eight. All right, here we go. Final four picks. Man, again, I don't love Duke this year, especially having lost Caleb Foster, but they're just so solid. And between Boozer and if Ngangba comes back, and if Caden Boozer, the brother, if he can continue to play like he played against Virginia in the ACC final, that will be huge. And I think Duke, between their perimeter scoring with Evans and Boozer down low, I think they take care of the Fighting Tom Izzos, beat Michigan State. Man, so we got Florida and Houston. I'm sure that the selection committee, did this on purpose. This is the matchup they want. They want the rematch of last year's championship game. I don't know what to do with this because I like Florida, and they were on my short list with Houston, by the way. And it's so hard to go. It's so hard to make it back. But in theory, if this is the matchup, no matter what, you're going to have a team, who repeats in the Final Four. Oh, man. Let's see. What do our metrics tell us? So you got Florida as 9 in offense, 6 in defense. Houston 14 in offense, 5 in defense. So you give Florida the edge in offense, Houston the edge, slight edge in defense. But I don't know. I can see. Man, this is hard. Because I can see Florida's front court, giving Houston problems and getting, Joe Tugler into foul trouble, him having to leave the game, and just kind of them feeding between Hauk and Condon and Chinyalu. But the problem is, how are they going to defend Fleming's? I guess that's going to be Boogie Fland on Fleming's. Man. You know what? I'm going to go with Houston. I'm going to say Houston goes back to the Final Four, beats Florida in the rematch. All right, so we got Duke and Houston, which would be, oh, by the way, another rematch of last year, where Houston miraculously pulled off the win against Duke in the Final Four to go to the championship game. If we come back up here, we got Arizona and Purdue, the 1 and the 2. A lot of chalk. But for a reason. I mean, these are the best teams. I think they're all playing very well right now. I just think Arizona too good. Again, I don't think Purdue can deal with the size and physicality of Arizona or can defend them on the perimeter between Burries and Karchenkov and Bradley. And Del Orso coming in off the bench. I mean, Purdue doesn't really have kind of that third or fourth guard they can bring in to really light it up. So I'm going to take Arizona. Wildcats move on to the Final Four. Come down to the Midwest. We got Michigan and Iowa State. Again, I mean, Michigan, I would say definitely the more consistent team. I don't really worry about them kind of struggling to score like I do a little bit with Iowa State. And I don't know if they can handle Michigan's front court. And so I'm going to keep Michigan. Wolverines keep rolling on. All right, so here it is. Here's our Final Four. Indianapolis, April 4th. We got Duke and Houston, rematch of last year, and you got Arizona and Michigan, which in my opinion should have been the championship game because you should have had Arizona as the number 1 overall seed on the other side of the bracket. But I don't have a stick in the game, so it is what it is. But man, Houston Duke again, like, I don't want to pick Duke, and really their chance to win a national championship was last year. I mean, that team to me was a lot better, and a lot deeper. And then you got Houston, which again, I mean, will Houston be able to defend Boozer? But I think Houston can lock up the Duke perimeter. So I'm going to go with Houston. Houston representing the left side of the bracket. Now we got the right side, Arizona and Michigan. I really hope this game happens because to me, the whole season, this is kind of where all things have been heading is Arizona and Michigan. I think they're the top 2 teams. Michigan probably slightly ahead of Duke, and then Arizona at the top. I give Arizona the slight edge because Cadeau is not bad, but I wouldn't say he's really good. And will he be able to defend Jaden Bradley? I don't think so. So I give Arizona the edge at the point guard. I would say they're about even in the front court. I mean, Arizona has Krivas and Awaka and Pete, and Michigan has Mara and Johnson and Lendeborg. Man, crazy. But, I think, like I said, you got Burries. He can light it up. He could easily score 30 points. Delorso can come off the bench and score 20. I'm going to take Arizona. And so our championship game, again, would be a rematch of Arizona and Houston. They just played each other, um, on Saturday. And I think Houston took an early lead, and then I think Arizona kind of came back, then took the lead, and then kind of hung on in the second half and beat them. Um, and like I said, I think Arizona is the best team. It is hard to beat the same team, again. Um, but I think this is the year for Arizona and Tommy Lloyd. So there it is, taking Arizona over Houston in Indianapolis. Let's see, how many total points will be scored in the game? How many total points will be scored in the game? You're probably talking somewhere in the, I don't know, the low 70s. So, I don't know, let's say like 145. All right, there we are, Arizona, our national championship. There it is. Like I said, I love doing this. It's the best time of year, and I just can't wait for this whole thing to get started. Again, join my tournament challenge group, Mooney Hoops Bracket Pool on ESPN. And yeah, thanks again for tuning in and listening. Hopefully, some of this information was helpful or entertaining in some way. Like, comment, and subscribe below. Let me know what you think of my picks. And it is showtime.